not look good.
Hello?
Hi.
All right, make sure you can hear us, David.
I can, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we shall start. I call the Order of Site and Architecture Review Committee, SARC, meeting of May 23rd, 23. For the benefit of those joining us tonight, the SARC is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission that provides feedback on the architectural design and site layout of proposed development projects before they are presented to the Planning Commission. Introduction, by the way of introduction, my name is Matt Comcar, and I am a member of the Planning Commission and leading the SARC meeting tonight. With me is my fellow commissioner, Mike Craig. Welcome, Mike. In terms of conducting the meeting, for each item, I will first announce the item and then ask for a staff presentation, after which we may have some questions for staff. After that, we will look at any input from the applicant representing the project if they are present and receive any additional public comments. Following this, we may have a follow-up questions for staff, the applicant, or public speakers, and we'll finish by providing our feedback on the project that will be then forwarded to the Planning Commission. In terms of timing, as SARC meetings are scheduled immediately preceding the Planning Commission meeting, we have a hard stop at 7:20. To make sure we have enough time for discussion, we may need to ask the public comments be kept short or provided in writing following the meeting. With that said, I see that we have two items on the agenda. Staff, are there any desk items or changes before we get started?
There are none, though.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's get started. Our first scheduled item is 1940 Hamilton Avenue, PLN-2022-162. And present project manager Tracy Tam.
This
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry. This one is David. David, go ahead.
All right, so this is a modification to a previously approved site architectural review permit, a parking modification permit, tree removal permit, and utility variance for the property located at 1940 Hamilton Avenue. So this is a 20,000 square foot property in Hamilton between Lee and Phantom, adjacent to the First Congregational Church of San Jose. The Planning Commission had approved a 8,000 square foot office building on the site last year. That approval was predicated on the shared use of parking and the driveway facilities of the adjacent church site. Unfortunately, following Planning Commission's approval, that deal fell through. So the applicant is no longer able to use the church's driveway in the way that was anticipated. So the application that's under consideration would allow a change to the site plan configuration to allow for on-site access. So here we have both the approved site plan on the left that shows the church driveway, and this is the property line right here. So this is on the adjacent church property that allowed that driveway to provide vehicle access to the rear of the site and access those parking spaces. And then as part of that arrangement, this office building would also have the ability to use 10 of the church parking spaces to satisfy the parking requirement. Now, unfortunately, without access to the church's driveway or parking facilities, The building has been shifted over to allow a new driveway on the east side of the site on the property. And then to allow access to those parking spaces. So this has the effect of having a tighter site. It also loses parking stalls due to the inability of sharing those stalls on the adjacent property. And also the loss of a couple of trees that are in the way of the new driveway. The building itself, however, is exactly the same and will not change in its appearance or size. So the SARC report here is fairly limited, just looking at the parking now. So the parking now is substandard compared to what it would have been. The site's also just outside of the AB 2097 boundary, so it is not eligible for a parking exception. But as discussed in the report and the applicant's materials, as you're of course aware, the whole issue of working from home is dramatically changing the office landscape, and to the extent that it's not really clear how much parking demand office even needs. The applicant's request basically reflects just the changing operational model of offices, which staff does support. To that effect, the Institute of Traffic Engineers is evaluating all of its parking standards, but particularly office regarding kind of post-COVID changes. There is also, again, the additional trees that are being removed. And then lastly, this application also does include a utility variance. So following the Planning Commission's approval, the applicant did do further investigation with PG&E regarding these overhead utilities. Apologies, there was supposed to be an attachment 2 that we failed to include. That will be included with the Planning Commission packet. So those materials from the applicant showed the very complex interplay of having to underground these utility lines as they relate to the adjacent properties, as well as a significant capital cost to actually do that, that would otherwise render the project infeasible. So as part of the new proposal, they would request a variance to allow retention of those utility lines as they exist today. And with that, I'll take any questions, and we do have the applicant on.
Sure. So would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Daniel, so with the new configuration, if you can put that first slide up. So the parking that the project is going to provide is still behind.
Correct.
And it's going to be 22 spots.
Yes.
I think that's what we had in there. And then, something that was a little confusing, I don't, and it's a small point, but so 4 motorcycle stalls, are they the equivalent of 1 parking space or 2 parking spaces?
They are the equivalent of 1.
Because I think we said both in that report, different spots.
I'll double check that.
I'm pretty sure it's 4 to 1.
Okay. And then, so Daniel, and then I think in your report, so you said that, so the ITE is actually going to change, is in a process of changing their own guidelines,
Yeah, they're
probably
currently,
reducing.
yeah, they're currently soliciting data from, well, basically everybody, as much data as they can possibly
Okay.
collect throughout the United States, so they can better understand where parking stands in terms of office.
And now the city itself, though, doesn't use the ITE standards, but I think you said in your report that we're in the process of, or likely will be
Yeah, I mean, at
making
some,
that change, or have we
Yeah.
done that? Is that?
we have not, but at some point we will need to evaluate parking standards for non-residential. Obviously, the focus has been residential projects. And some of that might tie into the city's economic development strategy in terms of making sure that parking standards align with the actual demand.
Well, yeah, I get the only reason I'm asking on the parking, and it sure seems like 22 would be enough. I don't know what kind of use is in there. And like we said, a lot of people work from home now, but there's really, there's no street parking. I don't know. I guess we can ask the applicant later, but yeah, obviously they're not going to put a project in if it's deficient in parking. But if there is a parking issue that somehow crops up, there might be a dispute then with the church, because I don't know where else cars would go, but is this always the case that if there is a parking issue that pops up after the project's built, that we can revisit it, and we can force employees to park
Yeah.
outside and stuff like that?
I mean, the project could be required to prepare a TDM plan, so transportation
Yeah.
demand management. So
Yeah.
try to deal with some carpooling issues, trying to provide some bus passes, but I mean, realistically, alternating work schedules probably would be the most expedient solution. Just to ensure that the number of people within the building is commensurate with the number of parking stalls that can serve it.
Yeah, just like I said, I don't want a parking issue to come up and then they say, well, what was the city thinking? But I believe the experts and I think, well, it sounds to me like we have enough spots, but.
Yeah, and for most part, parking is fairly self-regulated. The city rarely actually has to get involved in parking complaints.
Yeah.
Okay. Owners can manage it.
And
That's good.
it's definitely not that, any of us can foresee the future. However, part of the design, and I think the owner's intent and the way we tried to create it was with the mindset that this building hopefully would be something that is, leased to a Campbell company. And so somebody that would be pulling their employee base from hopefully the neighboring area and somewhere that was maybe bikeable. So we've got showers in the building, we've got locked bike storage in the building. So the hope was that, people who are commuting to the building for work are not very far away. So hopefully that would help balance the fact that we weren't providing as much parking. So
Sure. Oh, yeah, that would be ideal. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Just the one final question is, so in moving the building, I'm not sure if you're moving your building over a little further to
we
the
did. Yeah.
west, I guess that
To
would.
the
be.
west, yeah.
So, and I just wanted to make sure, I know we're losing a couple trees and there's so many nice trees on that site, so. Does this show which trees we're losing? Does that? site plan shows?
The trees that we ended up losing, Daniel and I work closely. I mean, this project goes back. So we did everything within our power to keep all of those really nice trees that on this site plan are in the upper left corner. And those really large ones are being kept. I believe
Okay,
the ones that
yeah.
needed to be removed
Good.
for the modification on the site plan were over on the east side, and that was to make way for the new driveway. So there was one tree over there that was, kind of nice. One of the other ones was pretty minuscule, but by and large, we're keeping those really large trees that really identify the site, make it unique.
Yeah, okay, good, because that's what I was thinking of, those real
Yep.
nice trees on the top left. Yeah, those are beautiful. And the one final question, is there a pedestrian walkway then on that west side?
There
Is that what
is.
that-
So we're going to try and keep that low key. So we're not planning on making that concrete. We're going to try and go with DG. So it kind of weaves its way through those trees over there and feels much more natural in the way that softscape is being created. But that has been added as a way to provide proper exiting from that stairwell on that side to the street face.
Okay, thank you. That's it for
You're
me,
welcome.
Matt.
Thank you so much. So, thank you for all that. Tree wise, I'm comfortable with the answers. Parking wise, they also have two additional options. One is if they can make one or more of these parking spaces tandem, in case there are maybe company cars, or in case people that come in early and leave late, they may be able to use that one or two extra tandem parking spaces. The other possibility is they can also have these car lifts, car jacks, that just in case parking became so difficult that they may be able to use jacks, and store cars vertically. And this being Hamilton is pretty major street, so there's pretty good bus transportation there, and the bus passes you mentioned, that could go a long way, So those answers a lot of my questions about parking and everything, but the question I had was regarding utilities. So I understand that utilities are enormously expensive, but going from, yes, we go underground utilities to, we want a variance and we don't want to do anything, to me, that's a big jump. Is there a possibility that they can contribute like an in lieu fee towards future undergrounding of the utilities, rather than I'm not going to pay anything versus I'll pay my share, I'll pay something?
Sure. So the city can impose an ad hoc in lieu fee under the Mitigation Fee Act. It needs to be directly proportional to the undergrounding cost and their share of it. The problem is that right now, the city is not capitalized in any sense to actually underground the utilities in this area. So even if we knew how much money it would take to underground the segment of Hamilton Avenue, which we don't. And then if we took a percentage of that money from the applicant, the law requires us to expend it in 5 years. It is simply not feasible for the city to have the level of financial capacity to do any of that inside 5 years. I mean, realistically, the entire issue of undergrounding really needs to be reassessed citywide, and it's a much broader conversation than really can be dealt with on a project-specific basis.
Okay, so that answer, I guess implies that city is responsible for undergrounding, and I thought PG&E was responsible. This is PG&E's facility, you know, I mean, they are using cities right away, but they are owned by PG&E, right? Or
Yes, but undergrounding projects have generally been like on Winchester Boulevard or East Campbell, downtown Campbell 25 years ago. Those are city-led projects using PG&E funds in association with PG&E.
I see.
But PG&E, and they're working to underground utilities in the further outreaches of the cities where there is wildfire risk. Underground utilities within the cities has not been a high priority for them.
Am I mistaken in believing that the originally approved sites had the church parking lot, you know, been, you know, an option? They would have undergrounded utilities?
Yes, and the original design, they did anticipate undergrounding utilities just on their portion, not the church.
Right, I see. Okay,
And for the record, we did explore internally whether or not it would make sense to try to find a way to defer the undergrounding in the hopes that if the church were to actually develop their site,
Right.
that it could be done as one larger project.
right,
But ultimately, our Public Works Department, in coordination with PG&E, determined there actually wouldn't be any economy of scale doing that. It would just be just as expensive,
it would
unfortunately.
be this one, yeah.
And then also,
Oh.
it's not entirely clear, even if the church did develop residentially, if they would even underground. They would likely, we believe, use density bonus to seek a waiver or concession, which is avoided just for cost savings alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Which means, and again, that if you can't really underground these big segments of property, they're gonna be housing sites, and why really bother with smaller sites?
Well, I don't even know. It's ridiculous because this comes up a lot and we always say the same thing, significant costs. And
It does.
we know they are significant costs. So it's like,
I know,
it's kind of it's not useful to really have that requirement.
it's a known problem, it just hasn't reached the point of significance compared to other housing related
Maybe the
matters.
council should revisit the 5-year requirement. Maybe it's the 5 years that forces you.
And that might be a.
Well, that's state law, yeah.
So this particular one, as best as we understood from the communication with PG&E as well as the utility engineers, was we could potentially be in the neighborhood, and this is probably a $3 million project. We could be in the neighborhood of $1 million on the undergrounding or more. And what makes this particular area even trickier is the lines cross the street. And as you know, in this area, across the street is actually San Jose. So this is not even a city of Campbell thing. You'd actually have to involve San Jose into the undergrounding. You'd be in both cities at the same time in order to try and make this happen in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. That's why it shouldn't even be on the books. It's it's a great idea. We'd all love to have it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so it's so much nicer. Hey, David, Matt had a good question, and he brought it up, but just ask you if in the worst case situation, parking wise, tandem parking sounds to me like a pretty good idea on that site. Is that anything that you guys think that you could do if you had to do that? Is that any problem with that?
Sure. I think you'd probably pick up maybe an additional 2 stalls. Other than that, because of the size of the site, you run into a problem with the drive aisle and the required clearances and the fire lanes and everything else. And so you really can't get in the way of what the fire truck needs in case of emergency. So maybe you get 2 stalls max. The car stackers, which was a good idea, is something we looked into at the very beginning of the project. I think that's an option, but you know, what you pay per stall, at the end of the day, you're likely better off as either a landlord or a tenant to try and push some kind of TDM program where you're encouraging people not to drive and get them on. There are 2 bus routes close by, and like Daniel mentioned, we're just outside of that half-mile zone, you know, in order for the mass transit as well. So I think that, along with the fact that you've got Uber and Lyft and so many other options besides, you know, more paving and more cars, that I think one of those likely makes the most sense from a financial standpoint is find other ways to encourage people to get there without necessarily, you know, trying to create more cars on site.
Hey, David, let me ask you a question just for conversation,
Yes,
because
sir.
these are nice and loose meetings, but since if you happen to be within 1/2 mile.
Yeah.
What kind of would you have changed your parking at all for that project, or would you have put in fewer spots?
No, well, you know,
You
me,
think?
me personally, I want to see more landscape. We were really disappointed when, you know, to have to make the move that we did. We were super encouraged and really pleased when a negotiation was going through with the church. It was exactly what you want in this situation: is don't create more drive aisles, keep the street looking better, share parking with people who don't need it at the same time. It was a win-win-win situation for everybody. And then, you know, they basically reneged on that offer, and we had to move the building and rework our entire site. So, yeah, my personal opinion is provide the minimum amount of on-site parking you need in order for the building to function properly and lease it up. And in a situation like this, maximize the amount of landscaping you can get. But based on where we're at right now, I don't know that we could have, you know, if we'd have been able to do a few less stalls, I don't know that we would have gotten much more in the way of landscaping on the project. We're trying to do an occupied roof, so we're kind of trying to make up with some outdoor space there. So no, I don't think if we were within that 1/2 mile, we would have necessarily put in any more or less parking.
Hey, David, it's none of our business, but as long as, might as well ask, what
Sure.
happened with the church? What, are they
They
just trying
backed
to
out of the deal.
They just want to be as flexible as they can? Is that the impression you got from their?
I think that was it. I think that the truth was that they agreed to a joint access agreement on the drive aisle. They agreed to the parking coordination and the overflow parking. And after we got approved, they went back to the owner and said, here's the price that we want. Whereas before it was kind of mutual neighbors doing mutual things. We said, hey, listen, on weekends, you can use our parking lot for overflow parking. I don't want to get too much into religion and God and all of those other things, but they backed out of a deal that just didn't feel okay by everybody else involved in the project. And we had to decide whether the owner decided whether they're going to get raked over the coals and trying to pay an arm and a leg, or if they were going to try and do it on their own. And so we opted this route.
I remember our discussion last year, and that's like Daniel just said, it sure seemed like a win-win-win.
It was wonderful. We were so happy.
It's really too bad.
That was one of the things I liked about the project.
Oh, yeah?
Is that shared parking, you know.
Yeah.
We felt like because they were going to take the house, which was wonderful, it was going to stay there and they were reusing it. Luckily, the owner found somebody else to take it. So unfortunately, it's not going to be in the city of Campbell, but down in Morgan Hill, the house will be moved down there and be reused. So it's not going to be destroyed. But it was a win all the way around. I felt like it was one of those things you throw on TV and show how neighbors can work together and communities can salvage and make roads on how developments should be done. And now it's just, it'll still be a great building and everything else, but it's just a little bit disappointing that didn't come to fruition.
I thought the house was going to move over to the church site.
It was, they're not taking it. Nope,
Without
they
the
won't.
agreement. Oh, they're not even going to take the house.
Nope,
Oh, that's
won't
too
even
bad.
take the house. Yeah.
But you're
But
saving the
luckily,
house.
it's still being saved. It's just somebody in Morgan Hill's taking it and putting it on a big piece of property. And I don't know exactly what they're using it for, but it is being reused.
Okay, so thank you so much. For time management purposes, we need to move on to the next item. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
We're fine,
You're
yeah.
welcome. Thank you all.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, that's good.
All right,
Next item, thank you, Daniel. Next item is PLN 2022-110, 535 West Hacienda Avenue. Tracy Tapper. Thank you.
Thank you. So the project in front of you tonight is limited review, but I say limited, but essentially it is the entire project at hand, where the applicant is looking to replace the balcony systems. The project was developed, I think, sometime in the 70s and largely has remained unchanged since the original development. And so what they're wanting to do is to replace the existing balconies, kind of upgrade the architectural flavor, kind of improve the site. And in doing so, they're also going to be, per city requirement, upgrade their trash enclosures. Currently, they don't have any kind of roof covering, which is an issue for stormwater, and making sure there's also no drain in that area. So we need to make sure that whatever water does end up getting there is able to be drained out in a sanitary manner and not, no pollution or anything like that. And so they are proposing more of a modern appearance to the balconies. They are choosing to use a decking material, kind of like this wood material, and also this custom perforated metal panel. You zoom in here, a little easier to see. And with that, if you'll notice, they will be removing existing blue canvas sort of structures and frame behind it. And they're sort of making it a little more modern, having a roof for the balcony, just so you still have that shade and you have protection from an element. By carrying through the wood material and also the black color, just to give it a nice even top. With that, they're also going to be painting this portion of the building. The material isn't proposed to be changed, but it will be painted black to match the rest of the balcony, just so overall it's going to look more cohesive, not necessarily piecemeal. So that's more or less the extent of the project. They are carrying the same materials into similar materials, I should say, into the trash enclosures. These doors are existing already. It's kind of this metal bronze color. And so they're going to be carrying that color through for the proposed roofs for the trash enclosures.
Okay.
For any questions, the applicant is also online as well. His name is Alex Ross. He's the architect. So
Okay, so if I may start on this one.
Sure.
Thank you. When we design these at my day job, trash enclosures are usually plumbed to the sanitary sewer. Do you know if these things have drains to sanitary sewer already, or are they no drains?
currently, there aren't any drains. They will be putting them in. There are a couple of trash enclosures due to the sloping that will need some pumps, but
Okay.
they're not that large, and so they will be designed to fit all within the enclosure itself.
Perfect. Okay, so they would be plumbed to sanitary sewer, the ones that are not to the storm drain, but to the sanitary sewer.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. The other question, the other feedback I have is, I'm not your most color expert, on this panel, but one thing I know about black is it fades the most. So it requires tons of maintenance, lighter color, even though they fade, you can't really tell because they're light to begin with, but black, boy, we had a house that had white and black, and the black portions would fade to a gray much quicker than, but if that's what their taste is, that's fine. I just had the, feedback regarding the color. Otherwise, I am familiar with the area, I don't live near it or anything, but I have been to it, and so it's a very nice complex. Mike?
Yeah, no, I checked out the complex too, and I drive by it quite a bit, and it is really nice. I compliment the owners on their landscaping in the front, by the way. It's really nice. Of course, we did get a lot of rain, but it looks good. And I thought that I didn't think about that issue with the black fading. That's a good one. But I thought that the new design was, very modern. You see a lot of that kind of treatment, with the wood and the black railings, or the dark railings anyway. So I thought it looked nice. To be honest, I thought the blue awnings were kind of nice. It kind of gave a color scheme to the project, and I certainly didn't personally have any problem with the blue color, but I think I certainly have no problems with the new design. Looks great to me. I think it is definitely a nice upgrade, modernizes it a little bit. It's nice to hear the trash enclosures are getting
Yeah, that's
full from. That's so important.
big.
Nice item. So yeah, I didn't really have any issues. Looked good to me.
The other question that comes up, this is, I guess, more of a engineering rather than the architectural, is whenever you replace an existing impervious surface with another impervious surface, that counts towards the so-called C3 totals. And if you trigger that maximum number, then you gotta treat the water.
Mhm.
You know, now I know this is an older complex, it probably doesn't have water quality basins or so-called bioretentions in there. Have you guys checked that to see if, because this is so many balconies and it starts to add up, you know, I think currently the threshold is like 5,000, maybe 10,000 square feet, but it's coming down to 5,000 starting July 2nd,
Right.
you know, so have you guys done a calc to see if you can get close to the threshold or not?
Yeah, so our Public Works Department did take a look at the project. They didn't, let me just pull up their memorandum here. And let's see what the comments were, but I don't remember seeing any changes to the plans to accommodate for any kind of C3 treatment area.
Okay. So they either don't reach the so-called triggering point where they have to start treating, or because this water doesn't hit like oil, doesn't hit the like antifreeze or brake
Right.
shaving,
It's
doesn't,
not a gas station.
Exactly.
Yeah.
because it's not that contaminated, you can just, as long as you let the water go on a lawn surface or landscaping,
Somewhere, yeah.
that's considered treating.
Oh, okay.
Where as long as it doesn't just go directly into the storm drain, it goes through a secondary, you know, filtration like a lawn or landscaping or some sort of a thing, then, you know, I think that's enough. You don't-
Well, no, this is 200 balconies, so even if they were 20 square feet each, that would be 4,000 feet. That would still. be-
So it's very chance that it is tricky. So most probably they are piping it to a landscaping. And because it's not like pavement contaminated,
Yeah,
it's less pollution load, if
Yeah.
you will,
Yeah.
then, you know, probably the landscaping can take care of that. Because bioretentions are a big deal. Bioretentions, it goes on your deed, you know, the next person buying it is also signing that they will maintain them.
Yeah.
The life of the
The
project.
life of the project, so.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they're
well,
big.
it should, but I mean, it behooves the new owner too, because it's
Right.
just a mess.
I think, yeah, I also think it's a good project, you know. Think again about the black, you know.
Alex, is there anything you wanted to say or?
No, we're excited about the owners. You know, they got triggered to do this because the balconies out there are failing in their cantilevered systems right now through the building. So it's kind of a neat project from the standpoint of most of this is going to be built in shops and then brought out and, you know, lifted into place. So there should be little disruption as possible to, well, I guess both the neighbors, but mostly to the tenants when we put these things in.
Oh, that's cool. That's a way to do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that, but that's cool. Yeah, I think.
Surprisingly, structures that are built inside, like, you know, they actually have better quality because they don't deal with the rain and the
Yeah, I like it.
wind and the, you know, the wind and all that.
Just getting them, attaching them in there. It's a little trick, I suppose, but they get so many.
It's going to be, I'm excited to see the thing go into place. So it's going to be fun.
Because you got what's third story, I guess you got 3 stories, of course, so you gotta get up there pretty high.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, they got good cranes nowadays, good
Exactly.
cranes, a lot of cranes out there. Okay, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. I have no more questions.
I'm done, yeah,
Great project.
okay,
Thank you, Alex.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.